So just for grins, we're going to go ahead and start this off with a user interface where you type in the file name and you click a load button, right? Doesn't have to be a great big fancy user interface, but we may as well do it in a class. We get extra practice in classes. We get extra practice in user interfaces. Oh, by the way. All right, so let's go into our lecture. We're going to make a little Dropbox. Not a little Dropbox. We're going to make a little dialog. Guess we're on M. So now we're on N. Alrighty. We're going to make a little dialog that has a URL and a load button. Just about it. Not going to make it real fancy. The only thing that is going to show that I don't think we did much of is binding a string variable to it, to the entry field. Pardon me? Yeah. It's lecture N is in no way. All right. Alrighty, we're going to make a class. And the class is going to display our dialog. So something like this. What are we going to call it? How about just GUI or app or something? I'm going to go with GUI for mine. Colon. Now we need to make our init function. def underscore underscore init underscore underscore parentheses, and we need to pass in our selfie reference. And in a while we're going to be adding a title that gets displayed here. Now we don't have to do that. We're going to hard code this to just say, you know, enter HTML, enter the URL, so we don't need to pass in a title. Alright, so up above everything we better do our import from tkinter import asterisk. I don't think we're going to have any message boxes, so I'm not going to import message box separately, but you could just copy and paste it and change the star to message box. Might be nice to display an error, right? Okay, fine. I've already talked about it longer than it would take to do it. I found something else that required the double import, which still blows my mind why you have to do that. Okay, so let's make our window. Window. Now I could make this a selfie variable. I'm not going to make any selfie variables until the end, just because it takes up too much time to type self this, self that. I'd rather wait until the end, and this is how I've decided. It makes it a little bit cleaner, because not every variable needs to be a selfie, and so if we wait until the end, we can pick and choose which one is important. So window equals capital T lowercase k. Now if we stuck a frame in it, then we could add padding around it. I'm not going to bother. Well, why not? It doesn't take long to type it. Frame is equal to capital F frame attached to this window. And we're going to add a label to it, and we're going to use the grid manager to plop the label on it rather than pack it. And then we're going to call our GUI, create a GUI, just to make sure that it all works. Okay, so let's make our label. L1, there's only going to be one. So L equals capital L, label, parentheses, window, because this, well, let's attach it to the frame in case we wanted to add padding. I'm not planning on it. Frame, comma, and we have to specify the text that the label says. So text equals, quote, URL, end quote, in parentheses. Let's add this to our grid. L.grid, first row, first column, so it's going to be row equals 0, column equals 0. Row equals 0, comma, column equals 0. And by the way, like I said, if you really are late on your homework, work with me and we'll get it done. Right? Because some of y'all I have been talking about in text, and even if that's not the case, come and talk to me. I want y'all to succeed. Okay. Now, that ought to be enough to prove the point. I mean, we're just going to back this all off and do GUI, wait, app equals capital G GUI. Just to create our dialog, see if it pops up. Make sure we don't have any mistakes so far. I don't see my label. Maybe because I didn't pack my frame. I'm going to give up on the frame. I'm going to delete my frame, and I'm going to change this to window right here. I changed my label to attach it to the window. There we go. Now it's looking good. Probably should have packed the frame. Maybe everything would have worked. Not going to bother. Let's pause and make sure it's working for everybody else, because I just made some, surgical things on that. We're going to add an entry, and we need to call the main loop. I'm actually going to call main loop down here, although we could add a main loop method up here. That sounds cooler. But that definitely means that we're going to have to export window. Make it a selfie. Let's wait until we have the rest of our variables. Now, I don't recall if last week if we showed binding a variable to an entry. I think instead what we did is we created an entry, and if we wanted to put data in it, we called .delete followed by .insert. That's kind of lame. Instead, what you're supposed to do, or the best practice, is to create a variable and bind it to the control so that any time the control changes, the variable is updated. So we're going to do that. I believe it's called a string var. So we're going to say URL trying to think better give it a better name than this or not. URL underscore S for string var equals string var parentheses in parentheses. Now we're going to make our entry. E equals, and since we only have one field and one label, I'm doing the lame thing and creating single letter variable names. E equals entry, and guess what? We always attach the first thing, so window, and that's about enough normally. But instead, we want to bind it to that variable. So comma, and we're going to use the whole word text variable, no uppercase, no lowercase, text variable equals URL underscore S. We better add it to the grid. We could put it either below it or to the side, your choice. I think I'll put it to the side. L.grid, if you're going to put it below it, you'd change it to like row 1, column 0, something like that. But L.grid, row equals 0, comma, column equals 1. Let's run it again. I don't see my entry field. Because I called L, right? Change that L.grid to an E. All right, it's looking better. All righty. We need a button. We need a loop method. Let's just add the button as it's called the nickname people have called these as stubs, because it's not going to do anything yet. We just need a method for the button to call. So I back-tabbed df load because that's what the button's going to call, parentheses self, in parentheses, colon, and let's just print a message for now. Load clicked. That's enough to prove that it works. And we need a loop method so that the dialog will sit there looping until they click the close button, the little close X or something like that. So def main loop, parentheses self, in parentheses. Now we don't even have a variable yet to call main loop on. We need to be able to do self.window.mainLoop. Well, I kind of lamed out by not making any selfie variables yet, but there was a reason for that. I wanted to do it at the end of the function. So I'm just going to put a fix me here. We're going to come up and add our selfies up here. What variables do we need? I think we need the window and the URL s. I don't think we need any other variables. If we do, we'll come back and add them. So self.window equals window. Export that as what's known as an instance variable. A self variable is an instance variable, meaning it's a variable tied to that instance, that object. And then self.url_s, I could have just called it URL, is equal to URL_s. Now I can go back down and make the main loop call self.window.mainLoop. So I'm going to delete my little fix me column. These are the things that I've added. I added those two. And I'm coming back here to do self.window.mainLoop. And y'all understand what that does. It just tells the dialog to not let the Python program continue until it has been closed, until it has been dismissed, until it has been destroyed. So after we create our app, we need to call mainLoop. App.mainLoop. And it's about time to run it again. Alright, so far so good. I mean, it didn't blow up. The program didn't complete, right? It didn't display its cursor until it was closed. Could print a done message down here, but nah. Oh, why not? Not printing anything yet. Oh, we haven't clicked the button yet. We haven't added a button to call load. And since nothing calls load, then it's not going to print that. Very good question. All right, so when I close it, that's when it's going to say done, because main loop caused it to wait until the dialog was dismissed. So what's left to do? Create a button that calls load, and then type in the code that's going to hit the web page, and pull it in, convert it to a list. All right. The syntax for making a button is going to look remarkably like the syntax for the other things. B is equal to button, parentheses, window, comma, text equals load URL, end quote, in parentheses. And we need to add it to the grid. I think I'll put mine underneath the other two and give it a call span of 2 so that it fits comfortably beneath them all. Or maybe just a, yeah. B.grid, row equals 1, column with an n equals 0, column with an n span equals 2, just to get it to span both rows, both columns, since we have 2 columns. I'm going to test mine. All right, there we go. We got a load URL button. Don't do anything yet because I left off something. Y'all remember from last week what I've left off. What do I need to specify in the button besides its window and text? When it's clicked, it needs to call load. So how do we specify that? That would be good. Yes, that's going to be a necessary component, but we also need a keyword here in the button creation. Comma, command equals self.load, parentheses in parentheses. You don't have to put it on the next line. All right, load URL. It says load clicked, but it's only printing that once. Wasn't expecting that to happen, and it should be printing that every single time. Don't start getting squirrely on me. It's worked for every other class I've demonstrated it today. Load clicked. Oh, you know what I did wrong? Does anybody spot the error in my syntax? And I mentioned it last time. It is so easy to make this mistake. I have parentheses after this, and so what is it doing? It's calling load the second the code runs. Well, I don't want it to call load. I want it to set it up so that the user interface will call load when the button is clicked. So you see that line self.load parentheses in parentheses, delete those two parentheses. That should be perfect. All right. Getting there, getting there. It's not going to take too much more code to print out, to access the URL and print it out. This particular code I'd like to take out of the class though, because this is a useful enough function that I think it'd be nice to use separately, and if we put it deep in a class, it'd be more difficult for you to use in the future. Okay, so we have to have an import. There's going to be two L's in a row in this, from URL, LIB, import request. The request is the request to access the web page. If we type in a bad web page address, I believe it's going to throw an exception, and we might want to put a try except around it. But let's define our function that's going to open the web page. Load underscore web page, parentheses, URL in parentheses, colon. That's going to be our function that we call. So page equals request, page equals request, parentheses, excuse me, backspace, the request dot URL open. That's just the syntax for it. Parentheses URL in parentheses. Then we need to read the page in. Raw equals page dot read, parentheses in parentheses. And let's just print out the raw text at this point. Print, quote, raw equals, end quote, raw. Raw. And just to save ourselves time from having to type in a URL every time, let's preload our string with a URL that I know works. You can always override it, but so what I did is I went to where we create the string var, and I'm adding URL underscore s dot set, parentheses, in parentheses, and here's the web page that I'm going to use. Let me just show it to you. Something that's been around since like 1996. Lumland.com, Lumland. I don't know if anybody recognizes this old school 80s anime character named Princess Lum. So anyway, Urusei Yatsura is the name of the show. So we're going to preload our URL with that. Where was I? So here we go. For URL underscore s dot set, quote, http colon // and if you left off the http colon part, it wouldn't work. If we wanted to get fancy, we'd make it so that if the user left that off, we tacked it on. http colon // lumland.com, end quote. Now when we run it, we're going to see that because we changed the contents of that bound variable, it's going to change the contents of that entry field. There it is, right? Preloaded. We can type in something else, right? And it'll be good to go, but alrighty. Is it working for everybody? Because if it's not, the next part's not going to work. I'll be right over there. Alrighty, so here is where we need to invoke our load web page code. So down in our load event handler, our load method, that's called when the button is clicked, right here. Let's get the URL out. S equals URL, self.url underscore s dot get parentheses in parentheses. And then we're going to call our load function, our load URL function. Let me make absolutely sure I have the name right. Yep, load web page. See, I was about to get it wrong. So after s is equal to self.url dot, that just gets our string, the contents of that string. And then load underscore web page s. And it printed out the raw text of the web page. Now that looks like the HTML. It just has this funny B hyphen in front of it. But what it needs to do, I don't trust it to not be exactly what we need, so we're going to so-called decode it into UTF-8. Well, what is UTF-8? It just means the text that you see when you pull in the web page. It's a standard. So what we're going to do is, after this bit about the raw text, we need to decode it into plain text. So TEXT, whoopsie, wrong line. TEXT equals raw dot decode, parentheses, quote, UTF-8, end quote, in parentheses. And if you feel like learning more about UTF-8, you can Google it up, get the Wikipedia. It's just the text format that is most commonly used to shuffle web pages around. Most of what we get is ASCII, but if somebody wanted to throw, kanji or something in it, then it could be part of it as well because it's Unicode. Let's comment out the print raw and add a print text. All right, and there's our text. So you need to add those two lines to the load function. These are the changes that we made. Self.url underscore s dot get and load underscore web page s. Raise your thumb when you got that.
We add those to the...
This was to the load function. I just know that we had a couple folk who missed that. And then comment out the print raw and add these two lines. Well, other URLs and see if it works at all. Didn't for Vincent, unfortunately. Like rose.edu. Rose.edu. Rose works.
No, it doesn't. Not on mine. Mine did.
But Lumland works for you, right?
Yeah, Lumland works.
Well, that's crazy. I hate it when things behave differently for one person than another.
You missed something.
Since it's only going to take us a few seconds. If our URL doesn't begin with HTTP, colon, backslash, backslash, let's add it. So, if, quote, HTTP, colon, slash, slash, I said backslash, I was wrong, end quote, in URL, except I should have said if not. Go back and make it if not http :/ in URL : just tack it on. URL equals quote http :/ in quote plus URL. That way, if we leave that off, just like we do in a real browser, lumland.com, it ought to still work. And by the way, I want it so that you can type in a URL and hit enter and have it load. And when I tried to bind the enter key on the keyboard to the button, which you should be able to do, it didn't work, so we're not going to mess with it. Everybody got these 2 lines. All good? Okay. So we have some text. What I want to do is I want to turn it into a list of tags. So what's a tag? Well, let's look at a web page. This web page will do. View page source. You saw what I did is I just right-clicked on it and chose View page source. And this is HTML. The syntax of HTML at its simplest, and by the way, I chose this page just because I know it has incredibly simple HTML, is these things inside of angles are called tags. And for the most part, every tag has to have what is called a closing tag. Meaning that if you have the HTML tag here, which marks the beginning of the document, there's going to be /HTML at the bottom. Now, will the document load if you leave that off? Yeah, because browsers are generous, because people screw up HTML coding. And then so inside HTML, there's a body, so there has to be a closed body. And so on. The things that are highlighted in purple on our viewer here are the tags. And then there's some other stuff, like image. This is where that picture of the anime character is. This is what's known as an attribute. Style is an attribute. Source is an attribute. So the difference between a tag and an attribute is the tag begins with an angle brace, and then an attribute is attached to the tag by being inside its angle braces. And they specify things that modify the behavior of the tag. Right? An image tag does absolutely nothing unless you have a source attribute, right? It wouldn't know what image to show up. But we didn't have to put this one. If we didn't do that one, it would default to whatever size the picture really was rather than stretching it out to be 100%. So when we do JavaScript, we're going to go back to talking about tags. But for now, what I want to do is just to split our document in such a way that every element in a list is one of these tags. I want to see table in one element, tr in another one, td blah 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 in another one. And I had a hard way to do it, and now I have an easier way, and there's a more elegant way if you learn regular expressions, which confuse me even after 30 years of trying to use them, so I'm not going to do them. What we're going to do is we're going to use split, and I'm going to split based on the less than side, right? Because every tag begins with less than. So L, capital L for our a list of tags, or L tags, L is good enough, equals text.split parentheses quote less than end quote in parentheses. We could print L out. It's not going to be very educational, but we will see that it is now a list. Right? We see that it's a list because it begins with a square brace, it ends in a square brace, and every tag is inside a pair of quotes. What it did is it treated the angle as a delimiter, meaning it removed it. That's where it chopped the string up. So that kind of means that we want to remove the closing braces as well. And we want to remove, I don't know if you could see this, but when we ran it, maybe we'll fix it in a minute. It won't be the first thing we fix. We're not seeing it here, what I'm talking about. Let's go ahead and just remove all of the closing angles. We could have removed the closing angles even before we processed it by just calling text equals text dot replace angle with an empty space. But let's do it using list comprehension just to feel more pumped up. L equals L dot replace, parentheses, quote, greater than, end quote. And what do we want to replace it with? Really, we want to just replace it with an empty string to get rid of them all. Like, for example, if I put some question marks there and don't do that, here's what it would look like when it ran. Or boom. And the reason why it did that is because
You didn't have an alpha. Is it text?
I'm spacing out here. Okay, that is totally wrong. We need a for loop. Or I said we were going to do it with list comprehension and I didn't. Let's give it a shot. L equals square brace in square brace V dot replace parentheses quote less than end quote comma 2 quotes in a row quote quote in parentheses for V in L. That should replace every element in L with a version that is had. Except I need to make it greater than. I'm sorry about that. We've already gotten rid of all the less thans. Now when we print it out, there should be no braces in our code at all. Each element is a tag with a new line character. We don't like the new lines. We need to get rid of those as well. Does anybody remember the name of the function that strips? That might actually be the keyword if I think about it. Is it strip? Let's do list comprehension on it. List equals same thing. V dot strip parentheses in parentheses for V in capital L. All right, it's working. We have no more slash n's in our data. I just did not want to see any new lines in it if we printed them out line by line. All right, we have a list of all of our tags. I'm going to type in one more command, or 2 more commands, and then I'll do another walk. So, for V in L colon, print parentheses, quote, tag space equals, end quote, comma, V, end parentheses. And then let's comment out this L business down here. We don't want to see print L anymore because we're printing it in a more dignified fashion. There we go, right? Here's all of the tags that are in it in a nicely formatted fashion. Like we could scroll through here and find all of the image tags if there were a lot of image tags on it. Right, we could look for everything that begins in IMG and so on. So that is our little program for loading up the HTML and pulling it out. Now if you took Donna Wilson's fundamentals class, she did one where you had a program called Starbuzz or something like that, where you loaded a web page and you found the price of beans, something like that, and so it scanned for $. We could do something like that, but I think this is just about enough to demonstrate it. Now this doesn't actually do anything with the tags, right? But we pulled all the data out and we could do some more sophisticated manipulation if we wanted to. Let's load up the rose.edu web page.
It goes on forever, I just tried.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I froze my list, that's right, Facebook.
Still go, oh no, it's not, it's okay.
Facebook.
Okay, type Facebook and crash it.
No, no, I'm
http://Amazon is going to be huge. Amazon's going to be staggeringly large. And what do you know? It crashed. Alrighty, so that didn't work. That's just like yours, Vincent. Rose.edu.
Yeah, Rose is the one.
Boom.
It just goes on for a while.
Holy mackerel.
I thought about that earlier,
Alrighty. Let's look at the web page. I'm going to go to rose.edu. All right. You can see how sophisticated web pages have gotten over the past 2 decades. If we found some web page that was created like in 1998,
Tell if I can kick out of school for this. Totally.
there used to be one called hotwired.com. I don't think it exists anymore.
Oh, mine actually did the Amazon.
Oh, that just goes to Wired. Anyways, I can't think of an earlier web page besides the original one. If you type in CERN, CERN space original website, it'll take us to the very first website that was ever created, just to test the web browsers. The earliest web browsers didn't even have support for images.
There you go.
But there we go. This is one of the very first websites. And so if we view its source, even that one is kind of long, but not compared to rose.edu. And that's because rose.edu is very interactive. You move your mouse around, you can click on stuff. Web pages that were not interactive except for, loading up the next thing when you click the OK button until the development of JavaScript. So if we do view page source and we scroll up to the top, we're going to see some JavaScript. We can't read it. It's all squished together. It's like an entire lengthy Python program with all the carriage returns and spaces removed, right? It's almost impossible to read.
So that's an actual web page.
Right, this is rose.edu,
That's how
and
you
this,
would write it.
and this is the programming that allows it to be all interactive. Just like if you add something to a cart on Amazon, you want it to add it to the cart without it having to refresh the web page. Anytime you refresh the web page is when your program, it puts a little spinning cursor and it fails. You never want to refresh the web page if you possibly can. Yes?
How come Google doesn't work?
I don't know why. What is the difference? Why are these not working? In previous semesters, I've been able to get Google to come up.
Does Google block anything?
No, because we're just accessing it over the HTTP port, so nothing should be blocked.
You're just looking at code.
HTTPS google.com.
So it's just mine?
Well, it sure is waiting.
Mine instantly said,
Boom. Get address info failed.
mine's shorter than yours.
Did you do HTTPS?
No, not S. Just regular HTTP.
Well, HTTP should just redirect to HTTPS, so it should work just as well. So I don't know why. I don't know why some of these websites are not loading when we request them via HTTP, because that's all our browser is doing. Oh well. So I'm pretty happy with the progress we've made, even though we could stretch this out for like 5-10 more minutes. What do I like about it? It's demonstrated the creation of a class. This is like the 3rd class or 4th class we've made, so I hope it's really burned in how to do it. It uses lists. It uses calling .split. It uses list comprehension to process our list to clean up the data. Yeah. Okay, so I think this is a good little program. We got through it a little bit faster than the last class did, probably because of my bitter experience of working with them and getting the problems that time. Alrighty, are there any more questions about this? Can we think of anything else to do? I can't. So what we're going to do next,
Is there a way to, how websites have, they would have long lines of statistics. Is there a way to just pull out the statistics part of the website and then put it into a Word document?
Like an analytic?
Kind of.
well, what you would have to maybe do is, this is just a guess, is those things are probably in a table tag. And there are Python libraries designed for for HTML processing. And so you could load up the table as a list of lists, a 2-dimensional array, and you could process it like that. You could save it to a comma delimited TXT file and open that inside Word or Excel then. And that would have been a good project to do, but we didn't get to this in time. All right, I want everybody to scrap your project and do that as you're final project. Nah. Alrighty, so we're going to end a little bit early so that if anybody wants to show me their project and ask a quick question, we can do that. And also remember, you can always text me. Some of y'all know that I'm up at 1 o'clock. I'm happy to talk.
I still always feel bad texting you though.
Do not feel bad. I like it.
Last night and almost texted you.
I am so lonely at night. Please text me.